The morning sun was just beginning to rise over the new Geneva spaceport when Ambassador Cole received the message that would change everything. He stood in his office on the top floor of the diplomatic center, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hand, as he read the transmission from the High Council for the third time. "We send you 7. She is the least of us. A kindness to remove her from our sight. Perhaps your primitive species will not notice her defects." Set down the coffee cup and walk to the window. Outside, the massive landing platform stretched toward the horizon, designed to receive ships from a dozen different alien species. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for only 15 years, ever since the first scout ship had appeared in Earth's orbit and forever changed the course of human history. They were beautiful. There was no other word for it. They stood 7 feet tall on average, with skin that shimmered like polished silver and eyes that held the colors of distant nebulae. Their faces were perfectly symmetrical, their bodies graceful and strong, and they moved through the universe with the easy confidence of a species that had never known ugliness. They had learned over 3 years of diplomatic work, incredibly arrogant. The cultural exchange program had been idea. Humanity needed access to energy technology if they were going to expand beyond their own solar system. They needed very little from humanity, but they were curious about Earth's art and music in a distant, academic sort of way. After months of negotiation, an agreement had been reached. Human scientists would travel to study their power generation systems. In return, they would send one of their own to live among humans for a year. Had expected a scholar or a diplomat. Instead, he had received this message, dripping with contempt and cruelty. His assistant, a young woman named Lucy Park, knocked on the door and entered without waiting for a response. She had been working with for 2 years and knew that he preferred efficiency over formality. "The shuttle is entering the atmosphere now, sir. It will land in approximately 20 minutes. "Thank you, Lucy. Please have the greeting party assembled at Platform 7, full diplomatic honors." Lucy hesitated. "Sir, are you sure that's appropriate? The message we received seemed to suggest that this individual is not highly regarded by her own people." Turned away from the window, his expression was calm, but there was something hard in his eyes. "That individual is a guest of Earth, Lucy. She will be treated with the same respect we would show any visitor, regardless of what her own people think of her. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir, of course." Lucy nodded quickly and left to make the arrangements. Took a deep breath and straightened his tie. He had no idea what to expect from this 7. They had not sent any images or detailed information, which was unusual. Normally, cultural exchanges came with extensive documentation about the individuals involved. The lack of information felt deliberate, as if they did not want humanity to know what they were receiving until it was too late to refuse. 20 minutes later, stood on the landing platform with a group of diplomats, translators, and security personnel arranged in a neat line behind him. The shuttle descended through scattered clouds, its silver hull catching the morning light. It was a beautiful ship, all flowing curves and elegant lines, designed as much for aesthetics as for function. The ship touched down with barely a sound, and a ramp extended from its side. Watched as the delegation emerged, and his heart sank a little at what he saw. 3 walked down the ramp first, moving with that characteristic grace that made humans look clumsy by comparison. Their silver skin glowed in the sunlight, and their expressions carried the familiar look of mild superiority that had grown used to during negotiations. They wore robes of deep blue that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Behind them, walking alone, came a 4th figure. His first thought was that she was smaller than any he had ever seen. Where the others stood over 7 feet tall, she was barely 6 feet, and she walked with her shoulders hunched forward as if trying to make herself even smaller. Her silver skin was marked with darker patches, like storm clouds against a metallic sky, swirling across her cheeks and down her neck in patterns that the other clearly found offensive. Her left eye sat slightly lower than her right, giving her face an asymmetrical quality that would have been barely noticeable on a human, but apparently marked her as defective among a species that valued perfect symmetry above all else. And her left hand, which she kept pressed against her thigh, had only 3 fingers instead of the typical 4. She kept her gaze fixed firmly on the ground as she walked, as if she did not believe she had the right to look at anything else. The lead, a tall male whose silver skin was completely unblemished, approached with measured steps. His robes flowed around him like water, and his expression suggested that he was doing humanity a great favor simply by being present. "Ambassador Cole," he said, his voice rich and melodious in that way all voices were. "I am Consul of the High Council. We have come to fulfill our obligation under the Cultural Exchange Agreement." Consul inclined his head in the traditional greeting of respect. "Welcome to Earth. We are honored by your presence." His lips curved in what might have been a smile if it had contained any warmth. "We present to you 7. He gestured dismissively toward the small figure standing behind him. "She has been trained in stellar cartography and basic engineering. She will serve adequately for menial tasks." Felt something tighten in his chest. He had dealt with arrogance before, but there was something particularly ugly about the casual cruelty in his voice. "I would like to meet her," said. Something flickered across perfect features, surprise perhaps or confusion. "There is no need for formal introductions. She is merely a servant. You may address her directly when you require her services." Consul kept his voice pleasant, but there was steel underneath. "On Earth, we introduce ourselves to all guests, regardless of their station. It is considered basic courtesy. I'm sure you understand." For a long moment, simply stared at. Though was clearly not used to being contradicted, and he seemed uncertain how to respond to this unexpected resistance. Finally, he stepped aside with a gesture that managed to convey irritation and condescension at the same time. "As you wish, Ambassador, though I fail to see what you hope to accomplish." Walked past without another glance, stopping a respectful distance from where 7 stood. Up close, he could see that the dark patches on her skin formed intricate patterns, like the marbling in fine stone or the swirls of ink in water. Her 3-fingered hand was clenched into a tight fist against her thigh, and her entire body was tense, as if she expected to be struck at any moment. 7 said gently. She flinched at the sound of her own name. Her shoulders hunched even further, and she seemed to be trying to fold herself into nothing. Waited. He did not move closer or make any demands. He simply stood there, patient and calm, until slowly, hesitantly, she raised her mismatched eyes to meet his. What he saw in those eyes made something twist in his heart. There was fear there, deep and old, the fear of someone who had spent their entire life expecting cruelty. There was shame, too, the shame of someone who had been taught to hate everything about themselves. But underneath it all, buried so deep that she probably did not even know it was there, saw hope. A tiny, desperate spark of hope that she was clearly trying to smother before it could hurt her. "Welcome to Earth," said, and he meant every word. I'm told you're a stellar cartographer." 7 blinked. The question seemed to confuse her, as if she had expected an insult or a dismissal and did not know how to respond to anything else. Yes, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I map star systems. It is considered a low profession among my people, staring at distant things rather than contributing to society." "On Earth," said, "we consider the people who map the stars to be some of the most important people alive. We have spent our entire existence looking up at the night sky and wondering what was out there. The astronomers and cartographers who help us understand the universe are treasured." 7 stared at him as if he had started speaking in a language that her translator chip could not parse. Her mismatched eyes searched his face, looking for the trick, the cruelty hiding behind the kind words. Behind them, Consul made a dismissive sound. "You are kind to the creature, Ambassador, But there is no need to coddle her with false praise. We have fulfilled our obligation. We will leave her in your care now. Do with her what you will." He paused, and something cruel flickered across his beautiful face. "Though I cannot imagine what use you will find for damaged goods. Turn to face." He moved slowly, deliberately, and when he spoke, his voice was very calm. Those who knew him well understood that calm was most dangerous when it was most complete. "Consul," he said, "I want to thank you for this extraordinary gift. Seven will be treated with the same respect and dignity we would offer any honored guest." He stepped closer to the consul, close enough that the taller alien had to look down at him. "And I want to make something very clear. If you ever speak about her that way in my presence again, I will personally ensure that every trade negotiation between our species becomes significantly more complicated. I have spent 3 years building relationships with your government. I know exactly which pressure points to push and which alliances to leverage. Do we understand each other?" Silver face flickered with something between outrage and confusion. Among no one defended the imperfect. It was simply not done. The weak and the flawed were cast aside, assigned to menial work far from the beautiful centers of society. The idea that someone would threaten political consequences to protect such a person was completely outside understanding of how the universe worked. "You are welcome to your attachment to the defective," finally said, his voice dripping with contempt. "We will consider our obligation fulfilled. She is no longer our concern." He turned and walked back toward the shuttle without waiting for a response. The other two followed him, and within moments the shuttle's ramp retracted and its engines began to hum. Watched the ship lift off and disappear into the clouds. Only when it was completely out of sight did he turn back to Seven. She was staring at him with an expression he could not read. Her three-fingered hand had unclenched, and she was holding it slightly away from her body, as if she had forgotten to hide it. "I apologize for his behavior," said. "That was inexcusable." "You," Seven stopped, swallowed hard, and tried again. "You threatened to harm your species' relationship with mine, for me. I pointed out that rudeness has consequences. There's a difference," smiled slightly. "Besides, they need our art and music more than they like to admit. Their culture has become so focused on physical perfection that they've lost touch with emotional depth. That's part of why they were interested in the cultural exchange in the first place." Seven shook her head slowly, as if trying to clear it. "I do not understand you. I do not understand any of this." "That's all right. You're going to be living on Earth for a while. You'll have plenty of time to figure us out." Gestured toward the waiting ground vehicle, a sleek electric car with tinted windows. "Come on. Let me show you where you'll be staying." The drive from the spaceport to the city took about 40 minutes. Spent most of it pointing out landmarks and explaining bits of human history, keeping his tone light and conversational. Seven sat in the seat beside him, her body rigid, her eyes darting around as if she expected something terrible to happen at any moment. Did not push her to relax. He understood that trust would take time, possibly a great deal of time. Instead, he simply talked, filling the silence with information about Earth and humanity, giving her space to listen without the pressure of having to respond. "The building ahead is the United Nations headquarters," he said as they entered the city proper. "That's where I work most of the time. Representatives from every nation on Earth meet there to discuss global issues. It's chaotic and frustrating and occasionally completely dysfunctional, but it's also one of the few places where the entire human species tries to work together." Seven turned her head to look at the building as they drove past. It was a tall structure of glass and steel, flanked by flags from every nation. "Your species has many nations," she observed quietly. "We do. About 200, depending on how you count. We've spent most of our history fighting each other over land and resources and ideas. We're slowly getting better at cooperation, but it's a work in progress. There is only the High Council. They have ruled for 10,000 years. There is no conflict because there is no disagreement. Those who disagree are, she trailed off, her three-fingered hand pressing against her thigh again. Removed, suggested gently. Reassigned, to distant stations, to work that keeps them away from the centers of power and beauty. She paused. I was assigned to a mapping station on the outer rim of our territory when I was barely an adult. I spent 30 years there alone, charting stars that no one cared about. Felt that twist in his chest again. 30 years. She had spent 30 years in isolation, discarded by her own people simply because her body did not match their standards of perfection. That must have been incredibly lonely, he said. Seven looked at him with those mismatched eyes. Loneliness was preferable to the alternative. On the outer rim, there was no one to remind me of what I was. I could simply work, and for a while I could forget that I was defective. "You're not defective," said firmly. She made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had contained any humor. "You are kind, ambassador, but I have seen myself in mirrors. I know what I am." Started to respond, to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. This was not a conversation that could be resolved with a few well-chosen words. Seven had spent her entire life being told she was worthless, and that kind of damage could not be undone in a single car ride. So instead of arguing, he simply said, "I'd like you to keep an open mind while you're here. That's all I ask. Just consider the possibility that your people might have been wrong about some things." Seven did not respond, but after a moment she gave a tiny nod. They arrived at the residential complex where Seven would be staying. It was a comfortable apartment building near the Space Center, with large windows that overlooked a park filled with trees and flowers. Showed her to her apartment on the 4th floor, explaining how the various human technologies worked and leaving her with a small tablet computer that would allow her to contact him or Lucy if she needed anything. "You'll have a few days to settle in before you start work," he said as he prepared to leave. "I've arranged for you to be assigned to the Houston Space Center's Stellar Cartography Department. They're very excited to meet you." Seven's eyes widened with something that looked like fear. They know about me, about my condition. They know you're a stellar cartographer with 30 years of experience. That's all that matters to them. But when they see me, they'll see a colleague with valuable expertise. Met her eyes directly. "I'm not going to lie to you and say that no one will ever treat you poorly. Humans can be cruel too sometimes, but we don't have the same standards as your people. Physical appearance matters less to us than character and competence. You might be surprised by how people respond to you here." She did not look convinced, but she nodded again. "I will try to remain open-minded." "That's all I ask," smiled and handed her a small card with his contact information. "Call me if you need anything. I mean that, day or night. I'm here to help." He left her standing in the middle of her new apartment, surrounded by unfamiliar furniture and strange human decorations, looking smaller and more lost than anyone he had ever seen. The first week was difficult. Checked on Seven every day, either in person or through video calls. Each time, she seemed more tense rather than less, as if the stress of being in a new place was slowly crushing her. She barely ate. She slept in short bursts, never more than a few hours at a time. She spent most of her time huddled in the corner of her apartment, watching human television programs without really seeing them, waiting for the cruelty that she was certain would come. When asked her what was wrong, she could not seem to articulate it clearly. The best she could manage was a halting explanation that there was always a trick. Kindness was never offered freely. When someone was nice to her, it was always a prelude to something worse. "They would pretend to accept me," she whispered during one of his visits. "Sometimes for days or even weeks. They would let me believe that things might be different. And then, when my guard was down, they would remind me of what I really was. They would laugh at my hope." Sat down across from her, careful not to get too close. "I can't promise you that nothing bad will ever happen, But I can promise you that I have no hidden agenda. I'm not pretending to be kind so that I can hurt you later. I'm just kind, that's it. She looked at him with those mismatched eyes, searching his face for the lie. Why? Because you deserve kindness. Everyone does. I am defective. By your people's standards, maybe, not by ours. Leaned forward slightly. Do you know how humans decide who is valuable and who isn't? She shook her head. We don't, that's the thing. We've tried throughout our history. We've created all kinds of systems to categorize people, to decide who matters and who doesn't. And every single one of those systems has been wrong. They've led to terrible cruelty and suffering. So the best humans, the ones we admire most, have learned to reject those systems entirely. They've learned that every person has value, regardless of what they look like or where they come from or what body they happen to be born in. That seems impractical. Maybe, but it's also beautiful, and it's the world I want to live in, smiled. It's the world I'm trying to build, one conversation at a time. Seven was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly, something in her expression shifted. It was not acceptance, not yet, but it was something close to curiosity. You are a very strange species, she said finally. We really are. On the morning that Seven was scheduled to begin work at the Space Center, arrived at her apartment to find her standing by the window, staring out at the park below. She had not changed into the work clothes that had been provided for her. She had not eaten the breakfast that the apartment's automated systems had prepared. She was simply standing there, motionless, watching a group of human children playing on the grass. I cannot do this, she said when entered. She did not turn away from the window. I cannot let them see me. What are you afraid will happen? They will know. The moment they look at me, they will know that I am flawed. They will treat me the way everyone has always treated me. They will see me and they will be disgusted. Moved to stand beside her, looking out at the same scene she was watching. The children in the park were running and laughing, playing some game that seemed to involve a great deal of chasing and falling down. Do you see that child there? He asked, pointing to a small boy near the edge of the group. The one with the dark hair. Seven nodded. He was born with only one arm. His left arm never developed. And do you see the girl next to him? The one with the braids. She uses a wheelchair because her legs don't work the way most people's legs do. Seven's brow furrowed. I do not understand. They are playing. They are laughing. The other children are not. They are not treating them differently. Because those children have grown up in a world where differences are normal. They don't see a missing arm or a wheelchair. They just see their friends. Turn to face her. That's the world you've stepped into. It's not perfect. There are still people who judge others based on appearance. But there are many, many more who have learned that a person's worth has nothing to do with what they look like. I want to believe you, Seven whispered, but I have been disappointed so many times. I know, and I'm asking you to take a risk. I'm asking you to walk into that space center and give these humans a chance to prove themselves. Can you do that, just this once? For a long moment, Seven did not move. Then slowly she turned away from the window. Her three-fingered hand was trembling slightly, but there was something new in her mismatched eyes. It was not confidence, not yet, but it was determination. I will try, she said. The Houston Space Center was a vast complex of buildings and satellite dishes spread across several acres of land. Drove Seven to the main entrance and walked with her through the security checkpoints, his diplomatic credentials smoothing the way. The Stellar Cartography Department was housed in a building near the center of the complex, a round structure with a domed roof that contained the most advanced telescopes and imaging systems on Earth. Dr. Carol Reeves, the head of the department, was waiting for them in the lobby. Carol was a woman in her early 50s, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and a face that had clearly spent a great deal of time squinting at screens and star charts. She wore a lab coat over casual clothes, and she had the slightly distracted air of someone whose mind was always partly occupied with complex calculations. When she saw Seven, her face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "You must be Seven. I'm Carol Reeves. I have been looking forward to meeting you for weeks. Has told me about your work, and I've been studying the mapping systems ever since we learned you were coming. Your approach to accounting for gravitational distortions is absolutely fascinating." Seven seemed frozen in place, her eyes wide. Realized that this was probably the first time in her life that anyone had ever expressed enthusiasm about meeting her. "I thank you," she managed after a moment. "I am honored to be here." "Honored? Nonsense. We're the ones who should be honored. Do you have any idea how long we've been struggling with the mapping of the outer territories? Your systems are generations ahead of ours in some areas, and I'm hoping you can help us catch up." Carol glanced at her watch. "I have a meeting in 20 minutes, but let me show you to your workstation first. Thank you for bringing her. I'll take it from here." Watched as Carol led Seven into the building, chattering enthusiastically about star charts and coordinate systems. Just before they disappeared through a doorway, Seven looked back at him over her shoulder. There was still fear in her eyes, but there was also something else. Something that looked almost like wonder. Smiled and gave her a small wave. Then he turned and walked back to his car, feeling more hopeful than he had in days. The first month was a process of gradual transformation. Visited the Space Center whenever his diplomatic duties allowed, which was at least twice a week. Each time, he found Seven a little less afraid and a little more confident. Carol Reeves had taken her under her wing almost immediately, treating her not as a damaged outsider, but as a valued colleague with unique expertise. The other members of the department had followed Carol's lead. They asked Seven questions about mapping techniques. They invited her to lunch in the cafeteria. They included her in conversations and debates about stellar phenomena. At first, Seven did not know how to respond. She apologized constantly for everything, even things that required no apology. She flinched when people approached her unexpectedly. She worked herself to exhaustion, as if she expected to be thrown away the moment she stopped being productive. But slowly, gradually, she began to change. One afternoon, arrived to find Seven engaged in an animated discussion with two human scientists about the nature of dark matter. She was explaining a theory that astronomers had developed, and she was speaking with a confidence that he had never heard from her before. When she noticed him watching, she did not immediately look away in shame. Instead, she gave him a small smile and raised her three-fingered hand in greeting. Felt something warm spread through his chest. He was not sure what to call it, pride perhaps, or hope, or something else entirely. "She's brilliant, you know," Carol said, appearing at his side. "Absolutely brilliant. I've been doing this work for 30 years, and she's already taught me things I never knew. That must be insane to have thrown her away." "They couldn't see past her appearance," said. "They were so focused on the outside that they missed everything important on the inside." Carol snorted. "Their loss, our gain." She paused, studying his face with a knowing expression. "You care about her quite a bit, don't you?" Turned to look at her. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to anyone with eyes," Carol smiled. "For what it's worth, I think she cares about you too, though she might not know it yet. She's been taught for so long that she's unworthy of love that she might not recognize it when she feels it." "Love is a strong word." "Is it the wrong one?" Did not answer. But that evening, as he drove home through the darkening streets, he found himself thinking about Carol's question, and he found that he did not have an answer that satisfied him. 6 weeks after her arrival on Earth, Seven made her first public appearance. The International Astronomical Society was holding its annual conference in Geneva, and Carol had convinced her to present a paper on stellar cartography techniques. It was a huge step, appearing in front of hundreds of scientists from around the world, but Carol believed that Seven was ready. was not so sure. He stood at the back of the conference hall, watching as Seven walked onto the stage. She was dressed in the simple clothes she preferred, dark and unadorned, and she kept her three-fingered hand pressed against her thigh as she approached the podium. For a terrible moment, she just stood there, staring out at the sea of faces. The silence stretched on and could see her beginning to tremble. Then she took a deep breath, raised her head, and began to speak. She talked about the stars, about the vast distances between them and the methods she had developed to map those distances with unprecedented accuracy. She talked about the lonely outpost where she had spent 30 years alone, charting regions of space that no one else cared about. And she talked about what those years had taught her about the universe. "I used to believe that I was small," she said, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "I used to believe that I was nothing, a flaw in an otherwise perfect system. But when you spend your life staring at the stars, you begin to understand something important. The universe does not care about perfection. It cares about existence. Every star, no matter how small or distant or different from the others, has a place in the great map of everything. Nothing is worthless. Nothing is discarded. Everything matters." She paused, and her mismatched eyes swept across the audience. "I am learning that the same might be true for people." When she finished speaking, there was a moment of silence. Then the applause began, tentative at first but growing stronger until the entire hall was on its feet. Watched as Seven stood at the podium, looking out at the standing ovation with an expression of complete disbelief. Tears were streaming down her silver face, catching the light and shimmering like stars. After the presentation, found her in a quiet corner of the conference hall, trying to compose herself. Her three-fingered hand was pressed against her chest, and she was breathing in shallow gasps. "That was incredible," said softly. She turned to look at him, and her mismatched eyes were still glistening with tears. "They stood up. They clapped for me." "Yes, they did. I don't understand. I showed them exactly what I am. I didn't hide anything, and they still. They saw a brilliant scientist sharing her knowledge with the world. That's what they were applauding." Moved closer. "What did I tell you when you first arrived? I told you to keep an open mind, to consider the possibility that your people might have been wrong about some things." "I remember. Were they wrong?" Seven was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "They were wrong, about many things." She looked down at her three-fingered hand, turning it over as if seeing it for the first time. "I am starting to believe that they were wrong about everything." The months that followed were the happiest of Seven's life. She did not say this out loud, not at first, but could see it in the way she carried herself. Her shoulders no longer hunched forward. She no longer flinched when people approached her. She laughed sometimes when Carol made jokes in the laboratory. She smiled. Her work at the Space Center had gained international recognition. Scientists from around the world contacted her with questions and requests for collaboration. Her mapping algorithms had been incorporated into Earth's navigation systems, improving the accuracy of deep space travel by almost 15%. The astronomical journals that had initially been skeptical of an alien contributor were now fighting for the right to publish her papers. And through it all was there. He visited her at the Space Center. He took her to restaurants where she could try human food. He showed her the art museums and concert halls that had fascinated the so much from a distance. He introduced her to the messy, complicated, beautiful chaos of human culture. One evening, about 4 months after her arrival, took Seven to a small hill outside the city where the light pollution was minimal and the stars could be seen clearly. He had brought a telescope and a blanket, and they sat together in the darkness, looking up at the sky. "The Andromeda Galaxy," Seven said, pointing toward a faint smear of light in the eastern sky. "Your species calls it that after one of your ancient myths, a princess chained to a rock." "That's right. Her mother boasted that she was more beautiful than the sea nymphs, and Poseidon sent a monster to punish the kingdom. Andromeda was chained to the rocks as a sacrifice, but Perseus saved her. It is a strange story. We would have called the princess defective for being a source of conflict. She would have been sent away. Turned to look at her. In the starlight, the dark patches on her silver skin looked like shadows, mysterious and beautiful. But in the human version of the story, she's saved. She's loved. She becomes a queen and is placed among the stars for all eternity. Seven met his gaze. You see beauty in strange places, Cole. I see beauty in you. The words hung in the air between them. Felt his heart pounding, suddenly afraid that he had gone too far. But Seven did not look away. Instead, she moved closer until their shoulders were almost touching. The marks on my skin, she said softly. They call them stains, signs of impurity in the genetic code. They look like storm clouds against the sky, or like ink swirling in water. They're beautiful. My hand. She held up her three-fingered hand, letting the starlight fall across it. They said it was a sign that I was broken, incomplete. Your hand has created maps that will guide human ships for generations. It's not broken. It's perfect for what it does. My eyes. She turned to face him fully, and her mismatched eyes glistened in the darkness. They called them the greatest mark of my defectiveness, the proof that I should never have been born. Reached up and cupped her face in his hands, gently, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She did not pull away. Your eyes are kind, he said. They look at the universe with wonder. They see things that other people miss. They're the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen. Seven made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. No one has ever called any part of me beautiful before. Then everyone you've ever known has been blind. She leaned into his touch and he could feel her trembling. But it was not the trembling of fear. It was something else entirely. I don't understand what I'm feeling, she whispered. I don't have words for it. When I'm with you, everything seems possible. When I'm away from you, I count the hours until I can see you again. Is this normal? Is this what humans feel? It's what some humans feel when they care about someone very much. Do you feel it when you're with me? Smiled every moment of every day. She kissed him then, or perhaps he kissed her. Later, neither of them could remember who had moved first. It did not matter. What mattered was that they were together, under the stars that she had spent her life mapping, and for the first time in either of their lives, everything felt exactly right. The crisis came 5 months after Seven's arrival on Earth. Was in a meeting with the UN Security Council, discussing trade routes through the sector, when his assistant burst through the door. Lucy's face was pale, and her hands were shaking. Sir, there's been an incident at the Space Center. They are demanding that we return immediately. Was on his feet before she finished speaking. What happened? They're saying she stole something. Classified astronomical data. They're claiming it's an act of espionage. The drive to the Space Center took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. Ran through every possible scenario in his mind, trying to figure out how to protect from whatever was coming. By the time he arrived, a crowd of diplomats and military officials had already gathered in the main conference room. Seven sat at the far end of the table, flanked by 2 security guards. She was trembling, her three-fingered hand pressed against her chest as if trying to hold her heart inside her body. Her mismatched eyes were wide with terror. On the large screen at the front of the room, the face of Consul stared down at them with cold fury. The defective has accessed star charts that are restricted to High Council members, said, his voice dripping with contempt. Charts showing the locations of our colony worlds, our defensive installations, our military assets. This is an act of espionage and an act of war. Stepped forward. Consul, before we proceed, I think we need to hear side of the story. His perfect face twisted with disgust. The creature's lies are of no interest to us. We know what she did. She has always been jealous of her betters. She sought to harm us by sharing our secrets with these primitives. I did not steal anything, said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was mapping the Outer Rim territories, using data from my own surveys. I found the restricted information by accident. It was embedded in a coordinate system I was analyzing. I did not know what it was until it was already displayed on my screen. Lies spat. Consul's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Before you make any more accusations, I suggest you check your own security protocols. If was able to accidentally access classified data through a standard mapping analysis, that suggests your encryption has significant vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities that other species with far less friendly intentions than humanity, might also be able to exploit. His eyes narrowed. You dare to lecture me on security? I dare to point out that punishing for your own technical failures would be both unjust and politically unwise. Stepped closer to the screen. Humanity has many trading partners now, Consul. We are no longer the isolated primitives you first encountered. If it becomes known that you sent us a gift only to use her as a scapegoat for your own mistakes, other species might begin to question the integrity of diplomacy. For a long moment, the connection hummed with tension. Could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on him, could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on his shoulders. Then slowly, his expression smoothed into something cold and calculating. Very well, Ambassador. We will accept your explanation for the moment, but know this. The defective was sent to you because she was unwanted. She remains unwanted. She is no longer, if you wish to keep her, she is your burden to bear. But do not expect any further assistance from us in managing her. Condition. The screen went dark. Turned to find Seven staring at him, tears streaming down her silver face. They disowned me, she whispered. I have no home, no people, I am nothing. Crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt in front of her, taking her 3-fingered hand in both of his. Listen to me. You have a home. Earth is your home now, and you have people. Carol, the whole cartography team, everyone at the center who has been fighting over which department gets to keep you. He squeezed her hand gently. You have me. Why? She looked at him with those mismatched eyes, and the pain in them was almost unbearable. Why do you care so much about what happens to me? I am nothing. I have always been nothing. You're not nothing. You're brilliant and talented and kind. You see the universe more clearly than anyone I've ever known, and I care about what happens to you because, he took a breath, because somewhere along the way you became the most important person in my life. Because I love you. I love everything about you. Your mind and your heart and your hands and your eyes and every single mark on your skin. I love all of it. Made a sound like she had been struck. You don't have to say anything. I know this is a lot. I know you're dealing with everything that just happened. I just needed you to know that you're not alone. You will never be alone again. She stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly, she reached out with her 3-fingered hand and touched his face. Her fingers were cool against his skin, and they trembled slightly. I do not know what love is, she said softly. My people do not have a word for it. But when I am with you, I feel like I am home. When I look at you, I feel like I am looking at the stars. Is that love? Smiled, and there were tears in his own eyes now. I think it might be. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. Then I love you too, Cole. I love you with everything I have. The months that followed were not easy. Humanity's relationship with the grew strained, though it did not break entirely. There were tense negotiations and difficult conversations, moments when it seemed like war might be inevitable. But slowly, things stabilized. It turned out, needed human art and music and stories more than they had ever admitted. Their perfect culture had grown stagnant, and the emotional depth of human creativity was the only thing that could revive it. They could not afford to sever ties entirely. And Seven became a symbol of something neither species had expected. She became proof that worth was not determined by physical perfection. She became a bridge between 2 worlds, a reminder that the things that made someone different could also be the things that made them extraordinary. On the one-year anniversary of her arrival on Earth, a ceremony was held at the Space Center. Scientists and diplomats from around the world gathered to celebrate contributions to human astronomy, which had revolutionized the field in ways that would take decades to fully appreciate. Dr. Carol Reeves stood at the podium, smiling at the assembled crowd. "It is my profound privilege," she said, "to announce that the International Astronomical Union has agreed to a historic proposal. The 7 newly discovered celestial bodies in the 442 system, which 7 identified and mapped using her extraordinary techniques, have been officially named." She turned to where stood beside, their hands intertwined. "The planets will be called 1 through 7, in honor of the woman who found them, who mapped them, and who taught us that beauty is not something you are born with. It is something you create through your actions, your discoveries, and your courage." The crowd erupted in applause. Stood frozen, her mismatched eyes wide, her 3-fingered hand trembling in its grip. "I don't understand," she whispered. "They named worlds after me." Leaned close, his voice soft enough that only she could hear. "You spent your life mapping the celestial bodies for everyone else to find. Now you'll be written in the stars forever. The universe will remember your name long after all of us are gone." She turned to look at him, this strange human who had looked at her damaged body and called it beautiful, who had taken her unwanted heart and made it feel like home. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for teaching me to see myself. Thank you for being worth seeing." Above them, through the glass dome of the observation center, the stars emerged one by one, ancient light traveling across impossible distances to reach this small planet where a species that refused to accept perfection as the only measure of worth had decided that broken things could be precious too. Somewhere in the void, 7 new worlds carried the name of a woman who had once been nothing. And on Earth, that woman finally understood that she had been everything all along. The applause continued as pulled into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. She buried her face in his shoulder, and he could feel her tears soaking through his shirt, but he knew they were tears of joy. Carol continued speaking from the podium, describing the technical details of the discovery and the significance of naming the planets after a non-human scientist, but barely heard any of it. All he could focus on was the woman in his arms, the woman who had arrived on Earth as an insult and had become something far more important. She had become proof that humanity was worth knowing. She had become proof that love could cross the vast distances between stars. She had become, quite simply, everything. When the ceremony ended, they walked together through the Space Center's corridors, receiving congratulations from scientists and staff members along the way, accepted each well-wish with a grace that would have been impossible just months ago. She had learned to believe in her own worth, and that belief shone through in everything she did. Outside, the evening sky was clear, and the first stars were beginning to appear. "There is something I need to tell you," said as they walked through the garden that surrounded the center. Looked at her. "What is it?" She stopped walking and turned to face him. Her mismatched eyes were serious, but there was no fear in them anymore. "When I first came to Earth, I expected to be discarded. I expected to be used and then thrown away, the way I had always been used and thrown away. I had prepared myself for that reality. I had accepted it. But that's not what happened." "No," she smiled, and it was still that small, uncertain smile, but it was stronger now, brighter. "What happened was you. What happened was kindness and acceptance and love. What happened was the complete destruction of everything I thought I knew about the universe and my place in it." She reached up and touched his face with her 3-fingered hand. "I am grateful, more grateful than I have words to express. You gave me something that I never dared to hope for. You gave me a home." Covered her hand with his own. "You gave me something too, you know." "What did I give you?" "Proof that the universe is stranger and more wonderful than I ever imagined. Proof that love can transcend every boundary every difference, every prejudice. He smiled. Proof that the most beautiful things in the universe are often the ones that look different from everything else. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. I think that is the kindest thing anyone has ever said to me. Get used to it. I plan to keep saying kind things to you for a very long time. She laughed then, a real laugh, full and warm and joyful. It was a sound that had rarely heard from her, and it filled him with a happiness so intense it was almost painful. I would like that, she said. I would like that very much. They stood together in the garden as the sky grew darker and more stars appeared. Somewhere up there, 7 planets bore her name, spinning through the void in eternal testimony to her worth. Somewhere up there, they continued their pursuit of perfection, never understanding what they had lost. And here on Earth, in a garden filled with flowers that had evolved through millions of years of imperfect reproduction, 2 beings from different worlds held each other and looked up at the stars. I used to think the universe was cold, said softly. I used to think it was empty and indifferent, but now I know that is not true. The universe is full of warmth if you know where to look for it. The universe is full of love. Pulled her closer. Where did you find that warmth? She turned her mismatched eyes to meet his, and in them he saw galaxies and nebulae, and all the wonders of creation reflected back at him. I found it in you, she said. I found it in a species that looked at an unwanted gift and saw something beautiful. I found it in a world that looked at a defective creature and saw something worth loving. She paused, and her voice dropped to a whisper. I found it in a man who placed the celestial bodies in my hands and told me that they were mine. Kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. They are yours, he said. All of them, every star in the sky, every planet in every system. They all belong to you, and so do I. Smiled through her tears, and the smile was no longer small or uncertain. It was radiant. It was brilliant. It was the smile of a woman who had finally learned that she deserved to be happy. Then I am the richest person in the universe, she said. We both are. And as the night deepened around them and the stars blazed overhead, they held each other close and knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Because that was what love meant. That was what home meant. That was what it meant to be seen, truly seen, and to be found beautiful. The universe stretched out in all directions, vast and mysterious and full of wonders yet to be discovered. But at this moment, in this garden, under these stars, the only wonder that mattered was the one they had found in each other. And that was more than enough. That was everything.